Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card podcast to recap Andor Season 2. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. Although Andor Season 2 is technically over, we're not done with the Andor conversations here on the podcast. We have brought back Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card podcast to the show to chat, basically not chat, just recap in a way, and discuss in further detail the entirety of Andor Season 2. You know, I feel like I said in last week's episode, I didn't really fully get to dive into some aspects of part 4 of the arcs for Andor Season 2. And with this, we get to extrapolate upon it further, let it sit with us for a bit, let it marinate. And this is us kind of diving into it a little more here in greater detail. So the Andor conversations obviously will continue here. And we have a wonderful action-packed episode for you on this podcast. Now, this is typically the portion of the show where we would do our Cloud City Gossip segment, but frankly, we don't have a lot of news in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm Adjacent Galaxy this past week here. With Andor concluding, that was a big news item last week, so make sure you go watch all of Andor Season 2 if you haven't yet. This is a full spoiler warning, frankly, for the episode as well. So, if you haven't seen it yet, you're forewarned. You can be spoiled to just about anything and everything in Andor Season 2 at this point. And that's all that I had for this week's news segment here. Let's get into our main topic discussion here and have our recap session about Andor Season 2 with Greg. Stay tuned, folks. All right, folks, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. As you can probably tell from the audio quality, we're back home at Force Ghost Conversations home base. And we are here with a guest. We are here with Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card. Greg, welcome back to the podcast. And how thrilled are you to chat about Andor Season 2, recapping it for our audience here? How are you doing?
Doing great, and thank you for having me on. And I could say that, judging by the reaction to Andor from my audience, everybody else's audience, I think we could pretty much just switch our podcast to talk about Andor ad infinitum, and I think we would just be just fine and dandy. Because although it went by in a flash, we're going to be talking about it for a long time, and I do agree this is a seminal moment in Star Wars,
Yes.
and I think it'll be discussed and chopped up and, I say regurgitated, but I'm like, it's, there's a lot there that just almost passed us by. And, but it's going to be fun to talk about it, and talk about it again and again and again, because it's just that good.
So what you're saying is you're going to rebrand to the Andor base card.
Yes, we might as well as cards Andor or something like that. I don't know. Just kind of mix it in every time with the episode. No matter what we're talking about, we'll just say, and by the way, how did you like Andor?
It'll be no longer out of Pringles cans. It'll be out of Andor arcs you'll compare it to, or Andor episodes. I don't know. You'll figure out some nomenclature by which to
considering how we blew out our own scale as Dr. Cass continued to go past the 10, and so we were into weird fractions at that point, and I'm like, man, we're gonna need a bigger can. That's horrible, but
we're slicing these cans in quarters and halves, and these poor Pringles
flavors,
flavors. Well, folks, we are here to recap Andor Season 2. It went by all the season, the whole entirety of Season 2 in the flash of a month, less than a month, it felt like. And, I feel like the show deserves some more time, of course, and appreciation. And that's why Greg and I are here today. And Greg, I want to start with the conversation being that the era is now finished. We're out of Andor season. In a sentence or two, what were your reactions to this season?
In a sentence, thank you for just not making it a word or two, because
Yeah,
it's
no
something.
one word response here. You get a
No
few
one
more to
word
play with.
response or that. I think it's got to be some of the best Star Wars that we have seen,
Mhm.
that's been written, and that will be discussed for some time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we're the better for it. I think it set a new bar.
That's great. That's great. I like where you're going with this. I like that it is set, this new base by which other things will automatically be compared to, right? It is a level of
Hmm.
quality that I think that all Star Wars henceforth, for better or worse, I think we could debate that, will be scrutinized against, right? I can already see the uh, many clickbait articles will be written in the YouTube videos with the red laser beam eyes. They're like, well, Mandalorian season 4 is not Andor. Therefore, it is bad. I think this was, for my opinion, I think this was exquisite Star Wars. It was definitely the more mature approach. It's the most mature Star Wars I think we've seen, next to a Rogue One. Um, and I think it tackled a lot of great themes that we'll get into, um, and focused on an aspect of the Star Wars galaxy that really hasn't been addressed so far. There is no lightsabers in this. There's very little mention of the Force. There's no mention of the main heroes of our saga. Right, this is an approach that really looked at it from the lower perspective, I guess, the people that aren't never talked about, right? The people that make the sacrifices that actually don't make it out at the end of the day, right? It's not Luke Skywalker running into the fray and then coming out on the other end and being the lone survivor, if you will, of the Death Star runner. I know there's like three other people that survive, but that's the stuff of legends and myth. Whereas the majority of people perish in those instances. Like this is a war and Star Wars, and there are people that do not make it out of wars.
Exactly. And just like with Rogue One, that really spoke to a generation that grew up, like Star Wars always seems to be,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, set, it appeals to kids, whether they get you in with the lightsabers and the blasters and the stormtroopers, and then kind of like,
Yeah.
for me, as it kind of grew into Empire and then Return of the Jedi, which kind of like curled back in. But, I remember coming out of Rogue One and going, this was geared towards an adult, a more of
Yeah.
adult audience, and you saw the sacrifice, and that's what I kind of liked about it. And I think Andor kind of took that and then really ran with it, where
Yes,
you
and did
saw,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
or.
and kept going. But also you got to see, it was dirty, it wasn't clean. You got to see the
Hmm.
internal strife, and I think even with this season, where the years were shortened, it was more of these flashpoints throughout the last
Yeah.
4 or 5 years. You saw some of these things, and you could see the threads, and you really saw the behind the scenes of how this all went down. Plus, I think even with the squabbling of the Rebel Alliance, you kind of see
Hmm.
how maybe the New Republic, okay, we can kind
Yeah,
of
was
start to
set up
see
to
how,
fail too.
yeah. But then again, it's hard to govern such a large area, right?
It's
That's
hard
why
to
if you're
govern in
playing
general.
Risk, man, you can't run Asia in Risk, man. There's too many
Yep.
fronts.
Yep. Yep.
Even though you're getting those at
You
seven
get the
per,
territory, but man,
it's hard to defend.
it's hard. It's hard to keep track of it all.
Exactly.
Now we had riffed off air a little bit about the release schedule, so I got to get you on record as to your thoughts here. How did the 3 episodes a week impact you personally? Let's start with that one.
Well, personally, it's like I I get the idea of putting these in 3 episode arcs, right? Because I do think that you can kind of condense down to these particular instances, whether it is the
Mm-hmm.
marriage
Mm-hmm.
of Mon's daughter, whether it's the massacre of Gorman, whether it's Mon's speech and her
Yeah.
escape from the Senate. Whoever thought that was going to be an awesome, like let's just mash together. What did I say? 3 days of the Condor and
Mm-hmm.
Escape from New
Mm-hmm.
York, and let's put it in the Imperial Senate. But personally, it's like the hard part was, I could watch the first episode, but then, my wife works into the night, and so I usually pick her up. And so I'd have to stop. That's what it is, and go, and then maybe decide to watch, like the first week, and I think the last arc, I watched one, came back, and then binged the other two, even though we
Mm-hmm.
get up
Mm-hmm.
super early. So personally, it meant not a lot of sleep. The second
Wednesdays were rough.
Wednesdays were incredibly rough. But then, the second two arcs, I did pause in between where I watched the first one, maybe got the second one, and then went to bed and then got up and watched the other one, which I thought was better because there were some instances where I could kind of sit and reflect. And then as
Mm-hmm.
we were talking off air about, the fact that some things now you're kind of forgetting, right? We're doing a recap, but we are still having to go back and like, yes, I'm going to have to revisit a lot of episodes
Yeah. Yeah.
and try to figure out because there's a lot of nuance. And, these ones, you will not hear me complain about episode length because they were very dense. This wasn't a Mandalorian or Ahsoka or Acolyte where they,
Yep. Yep.
or even Skeleton Crew where they
Yeah.
could,
No 25-minute episode.
yeah, no 25-minute episodes with 7 minutes of credits. This was a full episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I thought that we lost a little in the group experience because everybody was on a different
Yes. Yeah.
level, and even the groups we talked to, and most of the folks in the threads and things we're in we're super fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some people just couldn't. Some people was like, I would prefer, um, and Dan Z, who had seen the episodes, decided to just do a week at a time, and so everybody was kind of off on a different thread, and so me having
Yeah.
to write for the Fantha Tracks pool, that also meant I wasn't really listening to a lot of podcasts
Sure.
specifically on Andor because then I'm like trying to not I'm trying to come up with my own review that I mean, because you just like anything else, you start sponging up stuff, right? You'll see like a reel from Tony
Yeah.
Gilroy, or here's an interview here, or someone makes a really good point, and you're trying not to like cop it, right?
Yep.
So then I'm also having to kind of wait until Greg and I can talk about it and
Sure.
ask questions. And so personally, it meant that I kind of shuttered myself in and watched, and then just kind of went week to week. So a 3-hour movie a week is great unless you've got a lot of other stuff going on
Yep.
and this thing called life. And so it was really hard because normally what we would do is we'd watch it and we'd watch it a couple more times, talk about it, and then see what
Move on to
everybody
next
else said.
week. Yeah.
Exactly. So I just felt that it was just like getting this stuff fed to us so much was like going back to buffet one too many times. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
as important as this series was to Disney Plus, to the Star Wars, powers that be, they really just ramrodded it down. And I would really have appreciated a nice, long, slow, but if they're trying to go for awards and flowers and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and if you split it up or you run it, you run the risk of not getting it. At the end of the day, considering what it cost, about $290 million, whatever
Yeah.
you think you were going to get from it, go for it. That you spent the money, it's yours to do with you as you please. I just think that considering how good it was, I think we've lost a little something by not having that week to week where everybody got
Mm-hmm.
to see it,
Mm-hmm.
everybody got to talk about it, and that I think the series, probably right up till the end, really was going at a great head of steam. I think the last one a little different than last, like episode 12, a little different than
Mm-hmm.
10 11, but I thought it was really right towards it, right up until the end where they kind of maybe took their foot off the gas a bit.
Literally.
We would have been like it, we would have been soaking it because right after Celebration and
Mm-hmm.
Tales of the Underworld and Light and Magic, I mean, what's out there now to kind of look forward to? The movie, but not a lot until then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Visions Volume 3 is next after this. So that's October.
Yeah, I'm
So
like, yeah, but that's on a whole other plane,
and
right?
that's exactly that's not even canon. So it's really just if you want to play in the Star Wars sandbox a little bit, there you go. But until May 2026, Mandalorian and Grogu, you're kind of in a desert now for Star Wars until then. And to have all this at once, I think we talked about this with Celebration, right? We're like, all right, you have Star Wars Celebration, you quietly drop Light and Magic Season 2 at the start of that, and then you announce Andor, so then you have Andor for 4 weeks, and then you drop Tales of the Underworld on May 4th. Like that's a lot of Star Wars at one time, and like some of that's gonna fall through the cracks, even for the most loyal and ardent Star Wars supporter. that's going to fall through the cracks. How could the normal, the normies, as they say on other podcasts, find all this stuff and enjoy it and ingest it, let alone the
Hmm.
other Star Wars things, books, comics that come out on a almost monthly basis in some way? It's a lot. And this was arguably between this and I think November of 2019 with Mandalorian dropping, uh, what Fallen Order dropping, Star Wars books dropping that same month, and Rise of Skywalker around the corner. I can't think of a more busier time than this era right now in recent memory.
I mean, it's going to be stuff that we'll be talking about for the rest of the year. And, if the
Yeah.
worst thing in the world is I can dial back my Disney Plus to an ad tier and save $10 a month for the rest of the year, I'm fine with that. Like you save me
That's
some
right.
hard decisions. But I would say, like I said, this stuff cost a lot of money. Andor was greenlighted and it was written and in production, during almost a different time in streaming.
It
And
was. Yeah.
so we've all seen this and we've talked about it, this evolution of what their expectations are now. Even Netflix is kind of past talking about subscriber numbers and they're more into about revenue. And so everyone's kind of
Mm-hmm.
pushing the goalpost of where what they make is a success. And so, when you're talking to us, and we've said before, it's like, now we have to watch the Disney, you financial calls? Do we have to kind of
Yeah.
see where they're at? And but it's just the world we live in now, where our space fantasy is based off of how well or how much they want to do. And there's still that, now, although this made for terrific television, and
Yeah.
we would hope that with Mando and Grogu, although it seems to kind of maybe it was a season 4 that became a movie, it'll be very curious about how that movie is structured and
Right.
how it
Right.
how it looks, how it what the story is. It seems like there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
going on that could be really great. We want to get back in there. It'll be a shared experience, but it's sort of like I still don't think the final book is written on what role do you want Disney Plus to play in year to
Yeah.
year Star Wars versus what it should be on the screen, in a way to give it to us
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
we're not like oversaturated. But we just were in May. May was a weird month.
Yeah, I think every brand is struggling with that question right now. How much do you put onto a streaming platform? What goes into a theatrical release? How much of story is in one that then impacts the other,
Hmm.
right? Because I think people are like, oh, it feels like homework now to watch these shows rather than good enjoyment of it all. So it's like, where's the line? Where's the line when it comes to that? And I guess the good news is that, well, we already know where Andor goes after this. It clearly goes straight into Rogue One. So we don't have to worry about Rogue One coming out in 2 years or 2 months or whenever it comes out. And then, you'll find out what happens to Cassian and the gang. We already know. So it had that benefit of being that prequel that then expands upon things and it makes us love and enjoy these characters and then adds to the lore a lot more. Now, I will say, from my perspective, I, I appreciate and understand the three at once. It might have served us better for some of those arcs in season one, um, because those were definitely tied together. Like I'm thinking the Narkina one, the Aldani one was definitely, you could release those three together. That first one was a 3 release pack, so that was cool. But like we were saying, it's been a busy time. I'm still tired from Star Wars Celebration. I just had a very busy week with commencement for my personal job last week. And to cover this, I just feel like I didn't give the show its due. And that's partly why we're having this conversation today, because
Hmm.
we could only watch it once. For at least you were on the central time zone, but I know you get up at 4:30 in the morning. That comes awfully early. You get that one episode in at 8 o'clock your time, when you wake up 2:30 potentially the next morning just to get those in before you got to get moving with the day. That takes its toll over the course of 4 weeks, even though when it's coming. And you know I hope they don't do this type of release schedule again. I'll just say it that way.
I
I won't
don't.
I won't
Yeah,
miss it.
I don't see, and I would really love to get away from the 2 or 3 episode premiere. Just stop it already. I
Yeah,
think
milk it
it's
out. Milk it out.
you don't need to do that because I think you short shift some of the episodes in there. It's like if it starts off a little odd, that's fine.
Yep.
I
Let it be quirky.
let it be quirky, let it be a little unanswered. Let's kind of go into let's talk at a water cooler about the next day. I'm like, we
Yeah.
don't have to do that, especially in something like this where it's like I said, it's these people don't live in a vacuum. Your audience doesn't live in a vacuum. You already had them. There was no way anyone
Yeah.
was going to miss any of this.
Hmm.
And like I said, if we're all like we're worried about you, Disney Plus, we want to make sure you're around. We want to make sure we
That's
get
true.
Star
We
Wars
wanted
from you.
more.
Yeah, but like I said, I hope it was worth it, and I don't know whether had they split it up, would they have still been able to get they better get awards next year. It's all I'm saying. Like
That's
if they
right.
walk
That's
away with
right. If
nothing,
they get nothing, I'll be mad because like, why did I stay up till midnight all these nights in a row and then podcast it as a 2.5 hour episode talking about what I could remember from one viewing of it,
exactly.
releasing that, and then feeling pretty good at it, but also like having that little bit of uncertainty and doubt at the back of my head. It's like, oh, you missed that. You only watched it one time. How could you? All these finer details that you missed along the way that you could have extrapolated upon further. And even coming into this conversation here today, I still have only seen all the episodes one time through. Like you can't
Mm,
really just binge this show for a second time afterwards. So it's just like, how do I feel like I'm fully versed in the Andor? And that's why it's going to be great to revisit the show and keep these conversations going and all that stuff. But for this first time through, it's like, man, this is a lot to digest. They're not like the most, let's just say, fun episodes. There's a lot of stuff that goes on and a lot of bad stuff that happens,
I was
and
gonna
that
say fun is not
there's
how I would describe this. No.
literal genocide. And when like Tony Gilroy at the beginning is like, oh, those poor podcasters, I don't know what they're gonna do, and literally joking about it, but honestly he wasn't. He was like, he knew the plight we were going to experience throughout the course of the 4 weeks here. Yeah, I won't miss this release schedule ever
No.
again. I'm glad that they finally got away from the 3 a.m 2 a.m early morning drop for a lot of these marquee shows. But let's be kind to people. Let's just really. If I'm on the West Coast, though, I have a different answer to this. I love it. Right? You
Exactly,
you,
right.
you have it at dinner time. You eat something. 5:30. You turn on Andor, or you're eating during Andor. You're all set. This is a different conversation. West Coast supremacy on this one.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like I think we found that the appointment television works really good. I
Yeah,
don't think the appointment has to be for 3 plus hours at a go.
that's right. That's right.
But I
HBO
do
figured this out years ago. Like,
yeah.
keep it going.
If you're gonna do that, then put it on like Friday night or something like that. I mean, like
Yes,
don't put it on
yes,
Tuesday night, for heaven's sake.
yes. Yes, maybe. Yeah, yeah. Maybe drop on May 4th an Andor block versus Tales of the Underworld in the middle of Andor and space it out a bit. But I digress. All right, Greg. Of the 4 arcs this season, which one was your favorite and why?
This was a tough one because I couldn't really because of the way the arcs go, like favorite, it's weird to say favorite. I'm like, I almost have more of
Yeah, yeah. That's hard to say.
yeah, I was gonna say I have almost more of a favorite episode, and I think those are more, I would have to say, and it would probably have to be the last arc, which is kind of funny because
Hmm.
it's the arc that part of it I have the most issue with. But I would say
Got it.
Who Else Knows, probably one of my one of my favorites. I really love
Hmm.
the extraction, of Clea. I also, with director Krennic and Deidre, that scene goes down for me as one of the best with the finger, and to find out later that that was an ad lib, but you could
Hmm.
see Ben Mendelsohn just chewing this up,
He
having
owned
the
it.
time of his life, and this is one of those, like, it's a complete victory lap. I mean, he's come back.
Yeah.
He sounds great. And just the whole season, right? I think him and Forrest Whitaker as Saw, although I think they got Saw a little shortchanged at the end.
Yeah.
I don't think that was
We know
my
you're at.
favorite
You
one.
don't know where I'm at. You don't know where
Yeah,
I'm at. That's all we do. We're
ah,
literally on Jeddah.
sucking down Rhino is what you're doing.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think that that last arc had a lot to do. It had to
Hmm.
serve both Andor and Rogue One, and it had to really kind of come out of the Gorman massacre and not be like, like it was something where, for me, the third arc was probably some of the most disturbing. for
Mhm.
me because I was like, I wasn't quite sure. I'm like, wow, we've seen whole planets destroyed yet. We've
Yeah.
seen the city of Jeddah destroyed, but that's from afar, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
when you see something on more of a street by street or a Daredevil type where it's just gritty, and then especially culminating with the fight between Cassian and Cyril, where
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just down to the wire, and that last little gotcha, like, who are you? He
Mhm.
didn't know, he
Mhm.
didn't remember him, and that was, Cyril has kind of staked his entire
The tragedy of
personality
it
on him.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that, and you saw, and it was really just, like I said, it was something where I kind of had to kind of step back, and I wasn't sure, like, wow, this is so far away from Star Wars, but yet, like, you have to applaud him for going, you know what, we have everything from like Nubs to the Gorman Massacre in Star Wars, and
You
so
got cuddly blue teddy bear to genocide.
to planetary genocide in order to get, a mineral. That it's, well, that line that I forget the Gorman front leader is like, what is it you're trying to take from us? What's in our ground
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
What's
so
so precious
important?
to you?
Oh my God. And just all that. But and then even seeing the relationship, like I said, I'm kind of down bouncing around between Deidre and Cyril and how it kind of really
Mhm.
dissolved. And here at the end, when Cyril finds it, his whole life, his whole last several years has been for a lie. Like I said, but I would say the last one, there are some moments in 12 that I think are really beautiful, and there's, like I said, there's some that goes, okay, the flashbacks. I have
Mhm.
thoughts. I don't really. I think they were at the expense of lot more story about Mon Mothma, but that's more my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I like everything you said there. And for me, I think I would say the third arc is one that I found to be most impactful. Just because seeing is believing, and the fact that Tony Gilroy went there,
Hmm.
and to actually see the horrors that the Empire are doing. There can't be really any Empire apologists anymore out there, if there even were. Like they just can't hide behind like, oh, that was propaganda, that never happened, or whoever. You see these people at Celebration that walking around like, I'm for the Empire, and like, I don't know how you can be anymore. It's very deliberate about what the horrors and some of the horrors that they specifically did on the ground level, like you said too. It's not like we're just blowing up a planet here, and there's something kind of detached from that because we just see it. We only see it really from Leia's perspective, and knowing that she has
Right.
family there and people that she's close with and all that stuff. You see it from her perspective, like as an audience member, like, I don't care, blow up Alderaan. Oh, Leia's affected by it. But and then Jeddah too, right? We get a little bit of the people there and see it from a different perspective, like, oh, but the holy city's gone, and then Scarif, yeah, we lose our main characters and cast, but we move on because Vader sequences right after that, and Leia, and there's so much there in that end sequence of Rogue One that just like it hits you all at once. This does take its time though, and we have the episode arc beforehand that we really build up an understanding of the Gorman culture. Frankly, even the episode one arc where we see the conference that talks about what they're actually going to do and recruiting Deidre for this effort, knowing that she's going to do what must be done. The Empire said, we need this mineral. You got to do what we need to do in order to get it out of there. I don't care how you do it. Um, and she executes that to the nth degree. And to see the Empire doing these horrific atrocities then makes the reward of the sacrifices in Rogue One and this show, but also A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, even all the more better because they're like, yeah, the Empire needs to be stopped at all costs. This is just one example across the galaxy of the various atrocities that they're doing during these dark times. We see a little bit of that in Bad Batch, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Solo, we see it to a various degree. There's many books and comics exploring this era, but to really be outright and be like, this is fascism at its worst here, is where we just kill indiscriminately for whatever resource we need. It's a stark alarm, and Star Wars has, I think Star Wars explained to this really well, where they explained, of course they explained it, but they talked about it in their recap about like a lot of people have kind of missed the mark about what Star Wars really is over the last couple of years, and this show really brought back to that core sense of like, um, Star Wars is about overcoming great evils. And
Hmm.
this is the great evil at work here that can really be extrapolated to modern times and even historical events. Um, and bringing that back to the forefront again about thinking through like, all right, who are the people that we put into leadership positions, and just making us question those things a lot further. And it's great that the Mon Mothma speech is a part of that too, and that's where she meets Cassian Andor. And it's crazy that two main leads didn't meet until almost the end of the show. um, and seeing the speech from one angle, we get that tie into Rebels that we see later in that, and it crosses over there, and I think seamlessly makes those great episodes align with each other, and just the canon of it all is great. um and there's just many great and wild character moments within these episodes. Like, I didn't think I'd ever feel for Edie about anything, and
Mm.
just seeing her at the end of that second episode in that arc with tears in her eyes and just the fear of a mother, there was just something heartbreaking about that. And like, I know that Cyril's death will be used as imperial propaganda, and she might love that to some degree, but in that moment there, she was experiencing the pain and loss of a mother, which was sad to see, in my opinion. And to make me feel for a character that had almost no redeeming qualities beforehand, um, is a testament to the team and how they executed a lot of these sequences here. So that's where I land with that one right now. And that's, maybe next week I have a different answer. Maybe it's arc 2, maybe it's arc 1, but maybe it's arc 4. I don't know. But this day and age, arc 3 is the right one.
I think you could probably talk to me, last week, next week, and 2 years from now, and I will have the same feelings towards Edie Carn. She is a hero to me. I love this woman. I love how she was written. I love how she was put in. The fact that we got space cereal, the fact that we have this person that clearly, like, was codependent on, uh, the fact that even like a character like her was so well written without being like overly done. Right now, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
props to the actress for pulling it off, but it was really great because he could do a lot. I was reminded in another podcast, I started kind of listening to the podcast now, but
Yeah.
that great line between Krennic and Partagaz, like, I can't save you this time, Leo, said
Yeah, they
so
go
much.
first name. Oh man, I loved it.
Nothing else was said, but nothing needed to be said.
Yeah.
And I love that, and especially, in just seeing, like, when during the dinner, right, earlier in the season, when, Cyril has to go down and lay on the bed, and he's just kind of like in the fetal position,
And he's
and
like
then
5 feet away from the table.
I know, and then the interaction between Deidre and Edie, and it was just really this back and forth, and just some of these things were just so well done. Like I said, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those where I think, it was going to be tricky how they were going to land the plane. And I think that at the end of the day, I understood, like I said, it was a very expensive show to make. One or two
Mm-hmm.
episodes, boy, it would have been great if we got one or two more. I think
Yeah.
I think they could have really explored a few things. Obviously, even Tony Gilroy says, there were some things they thought about, but it was going to cost like an immense amount of money. And at this point, like I said, it's interesting to see what 200 million does for Acolyte and 290 million
Mm-hmm.
does for
Mm-hmm.
Andor.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think that you probably can't pay enough for good writing, whether or not you're making a really heavy, Star Wars story like Andor, or if you're trying to do Mando and Grogu. Once again, we'll be paying a lot of attention to the
Yeah.
writing of this, because I
Yeah.
think it's just really been brought to the forefront now of going, you know what, you start with a really good story, and I don't care whether it's the volume or practical sets. I think we're going to be on board for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Now, particularly within these last two arcs, Tony Gilroy, the showrunner of this endeavor, had a lot to say about fascism and the dark cloud that it can cast across the galaxy. And I think that many podcasts have done a great job so far extrapolating upon those details. So let's talk about the other side of things. What do you think the show has to say about rebellions and particularly their effectiveness?
I think a lot of times you can get a romanticized view of a rebellion, right? The French
Mm-hmm.
freedom fighters during World War
Yes.
II,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
whether or not you're there or in, Norway, Sweden, all these resistance units. But at the end of the day, it's gritty, it's messy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's no, there's no, like, reward. There's no, like, your name is probably not going to go up on a plaque. I do
Yeah.
like when they go back and they reference Nemec,
Mm-hmm.
and part of the manifesto, where it's like, like, there are all these people that don't know they're involved yet, that are going to get sucked in, and there's going to be little things that are just going to, it's all going to add up. And that's what I
Yeah.
kind of like, because it's just going to take that. And, I know it's, you can really kind of put it against, what's happening now, and depending upon what the spectrum that you're talking about. But it is kind of interesting about, like the involvement, and what it really takes. And it takes, every last
Yeah.
measure that you have. And
Yeah.
I think that that's, like I said, it's almost like when you look at the characters from Rogue One, you go, oh man, these people died and all this. And then you see some of the folks that are kind of living, and it's kind of interesting. You're going, am I almost disappointed that some of the characters in Andor lived? Because I'm like, oh, did their character whether the character have meant more if they died heroically? I don't know. But when you see Bix and the baby, and you go, nope, that's fine. BMO chasing around another droid, and you're going,
Yep.
I don't need them to do anything else other than play in the wheat fields. Go
Live.
live. That's all I need you to do. That's exactly what, like I said, this is what Luthen didn't get to do. This
Hmm.
is what obviously Cassian and Jyn Erso, they didn't get to do. But yeah, it's like, so people can just live, and eventually one day produce Broom Boy. No, that's fine. That's
Yeah, you heard it here, folks. Cassian's child confirmed is Broom Boy.
I don't think that lines up, but anyway,
It does not. It does not. No, I think you did a great extrapolating there about um, kind of how the rebellion has all these nameless people along the way that either we didn't know before the show, didn't have a name to it, but behind the scenes was making things work. And the show really does make the common person seem more like the hero than the, let's say, the original trilogy would present them to be, because the focus is different, right? Like a person like Brasso, right, is a character that the fandom has really embraced and loved
mm-hmm.
because he stands up for what is right and he rebels, and he seems to have this kind-hearted nature about him and willing to do stuff for his compatriots and friends when they're down and out. There's, as far as I know, at this point, there's no like Brasso memorial anywhere. Like, he doesn't get a medal at Yavin.
He doesn't even
Uh,
get to go into Brick.
he doesn't even get brick for him. That's right. He doesn't even get the ultimate like Ferrick's memory item of it all. He doesn't. You think of that kind of character, and all the Gormans are probably written out of history, aside from Mon Mothma, putting into record at least what happened. And maybe the New Republic is like, hey, we got to memorialize this. That happened all those years ago. That was a key event leading up to our rebellion. But I think this show really showcases, at least attempts to showcase, all the argumentative nature that went into the early stages of
Mm-hmm.
the rebellion. Even up to Rogue One, at least this series starts with the Andor arc, Cassian's part in that arc, with that warring group on Yavin bickering. They can't even figure out what to do, and a lot of people wrote that off as like, "What is this, filler in an Andor series?" Right? But from a larger perspective, that is Gilroy showcasing the lack of communication between all these rebel groups. They landed there. They couldn't even say like, "Hey, I'm a part of the rebel this rebel group, this rebel cell," and they're like, they shot that guy down. That was Cassian's guy that he was supposed to be meeting up with there. And then he tried to talk to them, and they're like, "We can't trust you." And then they can't even talk to themselves, and there's no trust there that breeds from that. And then what's ultimately left from them is they're left for dead, and they get eaten by the monsters that live on Yavin before it's inhabited by the Rebel Alliance at that point. You see this mistrust between Luthen and Mon Mothma, and then it ultimately leads up to the ultimate, like, the council, whatever you want to call it, this rebellion council. I'm thinking of you, Senator Nora Jabel, and all the others, Admiral Radis and Draven, and all these folks, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and none of them can come to a full agreement about what to do, like, next. Like, does Clea stay here? What's her role here? Do we let her in? They're very controlling of like what comes in and out, but no one's taking a step forward here. And I think of that moment in Star Wars Rebels season 4, where Saw kind of zooms in every now and then, and he's like, "Hey, at least I act like a criminal. The Empire treats us both like, if we're both captured here, they're going to treat us the same here. At least at least I'm fighting. And it's hard to see like the rebellion at this point, even into Rogue One. Then it's definitely a through line right there that ultimately, if it's not for Cassian and Jin and K2 being like, hey, we're going to break orders here and leave, like, Scarif doesn't happen if they follow the orders of the council and they're like, well, there's a Death Star out here. We're done. This is it. We can't fight back at all, guys. Call it a day. That's the rebellion here. So it says something that you got to strike sometimes. It's a war. And they're not treating it like a war. They're trying to live in this other existence where this reality doesn't really make sense. Like, you can't have a fully ethical moral engagement and call it war at the same time too. And I think that's what Luthen represents to a large degree. Like, he allows Mon Mothma to have her tinted glass view of things up to a certain point until she literally sees people die right in front of her, while he's like, I'm gonna take out your ex-boyfriend here because he might leak some things. He's drinking a little too much here. He's a loose cannon. We don't know what he's gonna do, and I don't like loose cannons around here. And then just all the stuff that Luthen does, and then ultimately Cassian at the end is like, hey, we're not here if it's not for this guy. You got to respect that to some degree. You may not agree with everything that he did, but this Yavin 4, this built up existence, does not happen without Luthen. And the infighting just it halts these things from moving forward here. And I think that's something that Gilroy was trying to say about this, because like that's an empire thing, is like the one upping of each other, the ambition, right? Ultimately, someone's going to want more ambition than you. There's always a bigger fish. I think Star Wars said that once. And that's the empire. There's always someone trying to one up the other, and there's all this deceit. But when that happens in the rebellion, like, that doesn't move things forward here. They need to be working together cohesively and actively striking when the moment is right. And thankfully, in Rogue One, they strike.
Well, it feels better that they aren't necessarily in an unbelievable lockstep. That there is bickering, that it does kind of show you that everybody's kind of at a different point
Yeah,
in their own rebellion. Some are not really, some talk a game, but they're not really putting anything on the line,
that's right.
or they haven't ever had to, right? These might be senators or, like planetary leaders where they haven't really had to get their hands dirty and they don't quite know what it really takes, or they think they might know, but that they don't. And it's kind of interesting that you're just seeing this, like, look, this is what it really, like you see a lot in Rogue One, especially when you see like that last group that goes with Jin and Cassian, where there's these scrappy, scruffy looking group of rebels, and they don't look like, they don't look like Lando Calrissian and Han Solo at all. They look like, hey,
no
I've
capes.
got a pocket, no capes. I've got a pocket full of grenades, and like I said, it just really, it brought a new level into it. And like I said, it's great that it's there. And it's great that it's out there, because I would hope that future Star Wars projects can kind of look and see where some of the boundaries they can go. And instead of just, I don't want this franchise playing the hits for me because it's going to kind of wilt and die. They need to take
Gotta expand,
risks,
take some risks. Yeah.
take some risks. But like I said, and Dan's there to be the first to tell you, it's like, tell a good story, work towards telling a good story. I don't really care where it lies in. Of course, we want to see the story push forward, and I hope, whether you've got Ryan Gosling in it or not, give him something good, give us something good, and we're going to be here, and we'll take it and go in a place. Even like I said, in some of these places, it felt like they cranked this up to 11, and I wasn't sure. And sometimes you had to kind of step back and go, "Whoa, what did I just see?" But
That's right.
I'm happy that they did it, and I'm happy that it's out there, and he got to do the stories that he wanted to.
That's right. Yeah, they crank it up to 12 even, some might say. Forget 11. Well, there's one higher at this point. So Tony Gilroy was not shy about utilizing the stakes within these episodes for characters whom we did not previously know their histories. So of season 2, and frankly even season 1, you could even include here as well, which character's death hit you the hardest overall?
It's interesting when you're thinking about hardest, because I thought about that. Brasso's death is very tragic.
Yeah.
But in some cases, I would say, and we talked about Cyril's death. But I would say a death that I wasn't expecting, that I thought was just pulled off incredibly well, was Dr. Gorst. Let's go there for a second,
Mm.
because that
Mm.
really, did it sort of help kind of tidy up what we were getting worried about Bix? We were really watching her kind of start to kind of unravel a bit, because you could see the dreams were still there, or the nightmares,
Yeah.
and she was trying to take some coping, something that would kind of help her cope, that as we find out, it's not really going to end very well. And then you were kind of wondering, it's like, where is she going to go? Is she going to be considered a liability? Is like, if you had looked, like, when she's kind of against the window, kind of doing whatever she was doing, and then you
Mhm.
see her with
Mhm.
the child later on, would you have ever thought that that was going, in the
I was
middle of
not.
that was basically she gets to turn the machine back on Dr. Gorst, and we don't have to hear anything. All the camera does is pull back, and you go, that was a magnificent stroke. And then, of course, they just blow up the building, or at least part of the building. So I would
Poetic.
say
Yeah.
that was probably one of the ones that really hit. I mean, Cyril's death was really, like I said, it was very, very gritty and so forth.
Mhm.
Um, in some ways, what Mon's driver, very satisfying. It was nice to see
The
him
look
kind
on Mon Mothma's face
of,
too.
but but yeah, I mean, Cinta's death, very, like, oh, that's
Oh
tough. And
yeah. Yeah.
although I don't know if I felt it was, obviously it happens earlier, and by the end, Vel has had obviously a lot of time to ponder on it, but it would have been
Mhm.
nice, other than a
Mhm.
name drop, to kind of see what impact that had on her as well. Like I said, in
Yeah.
some of the, I think in the earlier arcs, doing the 3 episode for the year, you pull it off. Yeah, not that
Yeah.
hard. There's these flashpoints. It would have been nice on the back end, maybe, to add an episode or so, and maybe not get away with having, like, complete, even, like, you could have had 3 or 4 episode arcs, just like you would have had 2 episode arcs. Um, which
True.
is keep waving saying, please make. I wish you had made more. That's
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
going to keep harping back on. But I would say I loved. I love Dr. Gorst, the way they handle it, and
Mhm. Mhm.
it was a character I wasn't expecting to see again, and it was very satisfying to me to
That was
see.
a very fist pump revenge moment for the
Hmm.
audience too. We're like, we don't like this guy. There's nothing good about him. He loves putting that headset on people and just take, the whole story behind that thing of like, we murdered this group of people and the screams of their children. It was
It's
death.
terrible.
It was terrible. Yeah, it's death defying sound. Um, and that we subject people to it. And it might make you go crazy, and you probably will if you survive for a long period of time with this on. So the fact that he has to get that put on, and knowing that they were going to expand his operation too, like that was their answer to like, oh, we have too many people in the prison system, we can't due process them all. We will literally subject them to the worst torture in history, and then if they survive, they survive. Whoever is left will throw them in jail, and there won't be anything left of them. Um, they did the galaxy a service, I guess, by getting rid of this guy and stopping his research, because it doesn't sound like they had. He sounded like it seemed like he had the IP on lock for that thing, and didn't really share his secrets with anybody else. So it seems like that whole project is out the window too at this point, and they had to figure out other ways to mass incarcerate people. That's a good one. I forgot about the Dr. Gorst one. See, there's so much in Andor that there's just every time you rewatch it, there's gonna be something new, and I'll be, oh yeah, Dr. Gorst, Big Scotter
Gotta go
Revenge,
back for
and
seconds and thirds.
somehow in the 2 years she stopped her drug addiction and somehow came out on top of that. I thought for a large amount of time there that they were sowing the seeds that Luthen might take her out, just to ensure that like Cassian is involved with the rebellion more. They were really sowing the seeds of like he can't be fully involved if Bix is around, and they were playing around with that for a little bit there,
Hmm.
and that made me a little worried for a couple weeks about Bix's future. But she seems to have a pretty bright future ahead of her based off of what we know in this series, now that it is concluded. For me, I would say the character's death that hit the hardest was actually Luthen's, although it was
Hmm.
one that I knew was probably coming.
Right.
He's not in the events of Rogue One. It was just a matter of when. I know people were speculating, oh, he'll be early, but actually, no, he makes it to the last arc, and um, it's not necessarily the fact that he dies. I think it's the circumstances of how, and especially how they showcase a lot of the backstory between him and Clea, and how he basically adopted her, and they were together in this journey of fighting the Empire together. And he kind of pseudo adopts her. They had that a little bit of a heartwarming sequence where he's like, "Oh, you're my daughter whenever it's convenient." uh, so ultimately, that sequence is arguably a metaphor for like a loved one taking their parent, like taking another loved one off of like a life support system, which is basically what
Right.
that is, and the tragedy of seeing how that plays out, and just seeing the actress Elizabeth Dulo, I think is how you pronounce that. How she portrayed that whole sequence with the tears running down her eyes, and the certainty of knowing what she has to do, but also the pain of
Right.
living through, like, I'm the one that's taking him off this. This will surely end him here. That little kiss that she has on the face or something like that, I think that she does in that sequence too, just really tragic. And how they really, within the course of these 3 episodes, and later on Cassian giving that great eulogy of sorts um, to the council, the rebel council, about Luthen's importance to the work that they've done here, and that Clay will be a great asset to them fighting on behalf. Really brought to home, I think, the impact that Luthen had, and put into many words and also phrase and actions the importance that Luthen has to the events of the original trilogy, without ever knowing that up until this series came out. And that was a question that a lot of us had, especially after season 1, of like, oh, well, it's Luthen's role in all this. Is
Hmm.
is he a major player in this? But it seems like he was just very much behind the scenes and running intelligence, and being just a thorn in the side of the Empire, right underneath them for many years, until his luck eventually ran out, and that sunrise that he never thought he'd see eventually didn't come. So that was a tough one, I'll say, and they really executed that wonderfully, I think, across the board here. And no, I'm just also surprised at, I'm never surprised at the Empire's ineptitude, but the fact that there was clearly a distraction. uh, Even if it wasn't a distraction, never send your full group when Axis is right there and literally on life support. Like, who decides that we're all gonna go check this out and leave behind like a few measly stormtroopers that Clea just wipes from the floor, with her actions there. Like, the hubris of the Empire often is their downfall in many ways, and that's how they let things slip through the cracks. And literally, they let Axis slip through the cracks. Like, that's Clea saves everything. Clay is the key to all this. And if she doesn't hear the message from Luthen, she doesn't take him out. Unfortunately, she's not the one responsible for that. And then Cassian saves her and then is able to give the message. We may not be celebrating Star Wars in the way that we usually do, where it's, Luke Skywalker comes in, saves the day, and then the Rebel Alliance has this amazing victory at Endor, and then on Jakku later on, and then leading to the events of the sequel trilogy. There, we don't really have that if it's not for this arc here, and it all leads with Clea's choice to end Luthen's life there.
Well said. Well
Tough.
said.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah. So, core to the story heading into Rogue One was the departure of Bix from Cassian's life.
Hmm.
What do you make of her choice, Greg? And do you think that she knew that she was pregnant prior to departing?
Oh, I absolutely think she knew she was pregnant.
Yeah, you think so?
One of
Okay.
those things. I think. Yeah, I think a woman knows, and I do think that you kind of
You
have
think the
that.
Force healer was telling her some like subtle hints?
I think Bix was probably be able to do a good job on her own. Um, but I do think that she was wary that Andor was working maybe more, that there was more for him to do, and that her being around, he would kind of stagger back. She was seeing it, and so the Force healer
Hmm.
kind of emphasized that. But I do think that you know uh, you were like, on the one hand you're like, well, it's either going to end poorly, or she's going to have to kind of take her off, because we kind of know, like, we don't really see her in Rogue One.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But I do think it was tastefully done, and I think she, by leaving him the message and things like that. But it got her back to Mina Rao, and
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
great
Well.
that was a great way to end it for her and for the baby. But yeah, I think that she might have been thinking about it, but I'm sure finding out that she was pregnant probably just really crystallized it, and it was just a way, because I think giving him the burden of the fact that, like, now of course, like the tragedy that he never knew that he had
Mm-hmm.
a child,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
also that he would have acted differently with that burden of knowledge. And so I think that was one of those things where they don't have to say it, but you kind of can put it together. So I think the way it was done was very well. And it's sort of like when we're thinking most of the season, like, well, the characters
Mm.
are going to either end up dead on a floor, or tucked somewhere else away.
Yeah.
That was a nice way to go. Hey, she gets to go out on her own terms, and I think that was, can't
Mm.
say about a lot of the folks in
That's
this in
true.
this series. So good on Bix.
What do you think about her taking the at least the conversation away from Cassian? Like, he didn't have a say in the matter as to
Mm.
whether she stays or leaves. Like, what do you how do you think that potentially like impacts the story?
I guess knowing how strong of a character he is, I think he would have moved heaven and earth to
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's kind of nice because I've been kind of critical of the sister, right? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in now hearing other people talk about and Gilroy talk about, like, yes, he put that thread out. He puts a lot of threads out, and some he doesn't kind of go back to. But thinking that Casson went back to save everybody because he couldn't save his sister or find
Yeah.
his sister, I'm like, yeah, it's a nice character, kind of core. And
Mm-hmm.
but
Oh
I
no,
would.
I'm thinking Clea's sister. I am on that train.
But at any rate, but yeah, I just think that no, I think it was handled well, and I do think that they did a nice job.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is one of those choiceless choices here. She is literally taking the choice from him. Um, and I don't think that if he knew any of the, I do think she was pregnant too. I think, I think she had a sense of what was going on. Um, but yeah, obviously he was attached to Bix already. He would have definitely been 100% more attached if there was another human connected to that whole sequence. And Bix was one of the most ardent believers in the cause from the beginning of this series. She understood that the Empire is bad and was actively fighting against them and working with Luthen. So it makes total sense for her character that she would still have this tie to the rebellion and to the cause, even more so than Cassian to a large degree, because she had
Mhm.
willingly made the choice prior to him. And I think just somehow as time as 4 years went on, that force healing, how many times did she run across her and then realize that, like, oh, Cassian's more important to this than I am. Like, he's a
Right.
leader here. Everyone's telling me that he's going places here. He's got this bright future ahead of him. He's got a reason to be here. I feel like as he was starting to potentially drift away from that narrative, that future, she's like, no, 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 no. I gotta remove myself from the equation here so that he can fulfill his destiny here. I have to believe that. I have to believe that Cassian is one of these people that can take us to the next step here, and live in a galaxy that's free. Because Cassian is like, hey, we can get out of here and go live somewhere else. Like, we don't have to be a part of this. I'm kind of done with this. Let's move on here. But there's a part of me that's like, Bix is the only realist person here, because Cassian, you went at, you tried to do that before and you went to Niamos and the Empire was still there. Like, there's no aspect of this galaxy that you can
Hmm.
theoretically run to that their boot isn't going to exist, their footprint isn't going to be there, or they will find you eventually. And then, you're trapped under this again. You have to defeat the Empire. You can't live in a world where Empire and rebellion exist. The one has to win. And in order to have that future, that sunrise that everyone can see later on, that Bix and Child later get to see theoretically, is if Cassian completes this mission here. And she doesn't know what the mission is, but she just has this sense that he's going to be important to things and that he can be a leader and fix things. Um, and that she takes herself out of the equation in order to make that a reality. I think Cassian is a little bullheaded and stubborn when it comes to like his own personal wants, and this is, I think, through Bix doing this allows him to be more selfless in his
Exactly.
choices here,
You know,
which
it's
I don't think he would have arrived at himself.
it's like going back in the mid '90s and going down to Birmingham and telling Michael, I understand you like playing baseball, but you need to be playing basketball. You have, and they go and win three. They go and win three more NBA championships. It's
Yeah,
like,
I
you know
believe
what?
Space Jam did a great job of showing that story.
I understand you like playing baseball. You seem to be a pretty good player, but I think you need to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I,
Yep, go wear number
and
45
history,
for a season and see how that plays out. Switch
just
back
like
to
with the Death
23.
Star. Yep, history was on our side on this one. Michael needed to be playing basketball instead. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Cassian needs to be helping to bring down the Death Star.
He's got to be a messenger. He's got to send those plans up to
Yep.
Admiral Radish's ship, and then that gets into the Tanta V4, and then that gets to an R2 unit that then finds its way to a homestead in on Tatooine, and then this unlikely hero comes out of the ashes of what's left of his burning farm on Tatooine and goes off on a grand adventure. It's
Speaking
amazing.
of Radis, yeah. Speaking of Radis, also one of my favorite cameos of this season, and obviously,
Yeah,
Krennic and Saw get the top billing, but getting Radis back in there, that was pretty awesome.
there was a lot of great ones from Rogue One in this. Radis being one. Like seeing Bistan walking around in the on Yavin.
Yes,
Um, I did appreciate seeing Moroff, the character that was with the Saw Gerrera's partisans, that was featured heavily in early Rogue One material and then not in the movie at all. It was very nice to get that pull. Nora Jabel, I think, is a fan favorite for horrible reasons in Rogue One. I say the rebellion is finished. What is she
Ugh.
proposing?
Aw.
Um, what a guy. Yeah, they did a great job lining this up to the events of literally Rogue One. It walks right into the Tivik is calling. He's like, "You gotta come meet me," and they're gonna talk about a cargo pilot that it is with Galen Erso and all that. And yeah, the through lines here are pretty well laid out in this
Exactly.
series that make it. I haven't done the Rogue One rewatch yet. After this, have you?
No, I know that Greg went ahead, like was like right in
Mm-hmm.
there and
Mm-hmm.
watched it right after the last episode. I'll probably be watching it
These
again.
teachers with on summer vacation really get
I'm
some
telling you,
spare
man, they
time.
got time to burn. But
Jeez.
yeah,
Jeez.
well, you know what? Because I went straight into Light and Magic, like a
That's
good
a good.
podcaster. Got to catch up on whatever the heck I missed. And if you
Yep.
haven't
Tales of the
seen Light and
Underworld,
Magic,
Light and Magic. You're just filling in what you haven't seen yet.
exactly.
Oh man. Well, Greg, we're at my last question here. So, how do you think Andor overall will impact the future of Star Wars and storytelling, particularly within this universe?
It's kind of interesting because there's like what we would hope it would,
Mm-hmm.
but also bear in mind that these projects are staggered at different times, and you would hope that, like, for example, with someone like Filoni, who kind of like now oversees, right now, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Andor was almost like a legacy type project. You would kind of hope that these series don't necessarily live in a bubble,
Yeah.
and that they have they don't necessarily maybe have to have a through line, but you would hope that they would be on a level. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's enough
Mm-hmm.
data out there from the series, and like I said, some have resonated more so than others. We've covered a number of them on the breakfast backs, and so some just hit. Like, for example, like Book of Boba Fett didn't hit well with me, but when we were
Mm-hmm.
on with Dan Z, like going ranking our, like he ranks it real high, and
Yeah.
but it's everything hits. Like, I have yet to see an episode of Young Jedi Adventures, but I know that there are folks out
You're
there like
missing out.
I'm
You're
missing
missing out
out.
in Nubs Nation,
Um,
man.
and that's the same thing with like Rebuilding the Galaxy, right? Or some of the
Yeah.
animated stuff.
Yeah.
Some of Vision season 2 resonates me a little more than season 1, but I'm
Sure.
also excited for season 3 because I'd like to revisit some of these because I think if you're
Sequels.
going to
Yeah.
see stuff again, like, oh, then the characters are not just a one and done, and you go, well, that was nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Just
but yeah,
revisit the
I
sandbox a bit.
exactly. But I would hope that it highlights that good writing trumps all, and that
Yeah.
you've got all the toys, whether or not you're making a almost $300 million series, or you're gonna stick to the volume, or you're gonna make animated tales. Is like, we
Hmm.
love to get invested in these characters. We like to see the hooks. I think
Yeah.
the only thing that like I said, if we go back to, like, say, the flashback, Luthen's flashback, where I think my mind was trying to make a connection that I didn't have to worry about. I thought it was really clever, and I think they,
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
some podcasters talking about, like, the fact that it was all contained, right? We didn't have to see what was going on. We heard what was going on,
Hmm.
but we got the
Hmm.
whole thing. But you're trying to make that connection. I love the fact that we saw Naboo, without saying
I
it.
think we did. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it looked really much like that. So
That was
we
honestly the
like.
best cameo.
Oh, but first live action Naboo we've seen since what, 2005.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
So we like having this stuff connect. I think it's probably, for me, it's always like when I go back and read, like, say, Marvel comics. I was always a big team book fan. I always liked
Hmm.
it when I saw, like, even if it was like Spider-Man, I loved seeing other characters kind of come in because I love those connected stories.
Yeah.
I would just hope that they still, creators are still able to take risks, right? This place,
Sure.
these
Sure.
stories are not written by all by George anymore. They're written by different people with different ideas in different eras. And I would say, one, you know, your story group is there for a reason. Dave Filoni is there for a reason.
Hmm.
Make good stories. And then, as far as, on the Lucasfilm side, or on the Star Wars, or on the Disney side, let them take risks. If you have to give them budgets, yes, of course.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
want a movie to
No one
bankruptcy.
has a blank check. Yep.
No, and no, nobody knows more than me that, what you have. What was it? A Tron 3, thanks to, was it, Tomorrowland? No, what was the failed George Clooney Disney movie that it was
Oh
based
no,
on
it
the ride?
was Tomorrowland. That was based on the area.
I never want to see that happen again in
It's
a
actually a pretty good
franchise that
movie.
I
I'll
love.
be honest. I watched it the other day.
You cost me a Tron sequel with the Tron Legacy folks. I have a hard time forgiving on that one. Or I may forgive, but I don't forget. Put it that way. So, regardless of that, but yeah, it's just one of those where it's like, yeah, these things don't live in a bubble. Make good Star Wars, push some limits, take some things.
Hmm.
Yeah, Last Jedi doesn't resonate with everybody. It doesn't have to. I mean, take some risks, but I don't think, if you watch Light and Magic, or if you watch any of these things, no one's just sloughing this off. People who work
Yeah.
on this love Star Wars dearly and want to try things. And the only way for us to, we're going to get more Star Wars, unless it's, I don't want it to be kind of frozen in amber. I want to see
Hmm.
what happens next. And I'm hope, like, like, that's me I saw it when I was 7. I'm 55 right now, folks, and I would love to say, if I'm in my 70s, still looking forward to new Star Wars, I would absolutely love in my 70s, 80s, to go, show me something new, and I'll die a happy man.
And by that point, they could release 3 episodes a night, and you're not getting up at 4:30 anymore. By that point,
If I'm still podcasting, then I'm going to be like, wow, like, all right, I'm going to be a very grumpy podcaster in my 70s if I'm going to be like, I can't believe they didn't listen to me 20
30
years ago.
years
And
of
it's like,
Rebel
oh,
Base
nice.
Card. I love
Don't
hearing it.
put it all in there. Yeah. Oh man, thank you. I don't know if I want to thank you for that or not. We're going to do this until what? Yeah, like, at any rate.
Yeah, when episode 20 comes out, when they
God.
keep going into the future of whatever they're, Ray's great grandkids. Oh man, the stories that they could tell.
Oh.
Um, and you got your Tron Legacy sequel coming out in October. You excited for that?
Yes, please, Jared Leto, please just be okay. All I'm asking. I'm like, I like Jared Leto, by the way, in Blade Runner.
Hey, he rocks.
20. He was, there a little bit of Jared Leto goes a long way, but I do think that, this might just be a good vehicle for him, because it's
Mm,
a little out there, and I'm like,
outside
okay,
the box, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that. I hope some of my podcasting friends do a Tron do a Tron episode, because I'll be more than happy to sit and gush about Tron for however long you need,
Paging Jen Subchachai Bankard and
or the
Dr.
Colby Cast.
Greg
Yeah,
Cast and Colby Mead. I think you have a guest opportunity here with
telling you, man.
Greg McLaughlin here from Rebel Base Card. So you know where to find him. uh, so yeah, I think well, first I am very excited for Tron Ares in the future. So just noting that for the record. But two, I agree. Dare to be bold. Um, have a great story, and be unapologetic about the story you're trying to tell. And I think that's been at the forefront of the press tour that Gilroy's been on. He's just like, yeah, I didn't care about that comic, so I didn't address it.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
or
He's talking about the K2SO.
yep,
Yeah, that was funny.
got it right here. I was like, oh well, that went out the
I
window.
think I had it. I had it at one time. I must have bought it at one time. But yeah, if you're writing the comics, more so even
No,
than the books, like
you're,
that
you're more likely getting tossed out. Yeah.
you're getting retconned.
However,
So
it they did talk about it in a certain way. Not the comic, but the way they addressed the events of the birth of K2SO in this show, right? Where Draven's like, this is not on record, right? So therefore, none of the Gorman Cassie's involvement in Gorman is not officially in the rebellion record.
right.
That leads me to think. So when they ask, like, where's K2? Like, how did K2 come about? Someone's on Yavin. This is the story they give. So therefore, both can exist. It's just asterisk, you know, what's the story that someone told one day and then that kind of stuck versus what actually happened. This happens
See, that's
all
how you
across
treat your
history and
legends.
myth. Yeah, that's how you treat legends.
Exactly.
That's right.
As someone
Um,
who's been going back and getting a lot of the Marvel UK comics, which were mostly
mm,
reprints of the American Marvel run, but there are stories in there that you only saw in the Marvel UK run until years later. These are great because you can kind
yeah.
of go, you know what? I don't need. I wanted to see what a creator did then, and they're coming up. And surprising, there was this one storyline that I'm reading that it was not in the Marvel US
Mm,
run, but you had some other rebels and a cool female rebel that Missy, that you go, oh, this is interesting. She's on an adventure with Luke and Leia, and you're like, okay, this is
mm,
kind of cool. We've
mm.
we've expanded our roster a little bit, and I think the character's done really well. And there was a couple other rebel pilots that are exploring. You're like, ooh, I kind of like this, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially when back then, they, even with constrictions, they still had some fun stories to tell. And it was,
Hmm.
and if you were young back then, you're like, yeah, let me dive in. And if they end up getting retconned, it's all right. They can't take
That's
the
right.
comic
Yep.
away from you, Anthony. So
It still exists.
you can
Yep, I
read it
have it in
anytime.
physical. No one's coming in. The Disney police aren't coming in, breaking down and taking away my comic from me. It still exists,
Exactly.
everybody. Go find it at your local comic shop. I bet it's went up a dollar or two because of this story. Um, and I will say too, just for the impact of Andor, is so it's interesting. The story that came out before Andor was Skeleton Crew, and the story that came out recently was Andor. The tone of both are diametric in terms of one is very, very kid friendly, very intro to Star Wars, and the other one is very in the weeds of Star Wars and the most, arguably the most mature thing that exists. So, in a live action sense, that's your spectrum of Star Wars, right? Everything else is in the middle there somewhere on this range, and I hope that just gives them the um, I guess the ability and the interest and the focus to expand that even further. Tell things in different tones. Make something more mature than Andor. I dare you. Make something more kid friendly than Skeleton Crew. And if it's a good story, it'll hit. Right. I think that's all that matters. But I think that's what helps to keep things fresh is the variety of tones that we get. So one day we get a Mandalorian season or a movie. The next day we get Starfighter, right? And I don't know where that's going to fall on this spectrum here. Or the next day we get episode 10. And that'll probably be more in line with like the trilogies that we've gotten thus far, or a Rogue One fits somewhere in this, or Solo is not on the same spectrum, and Rebels isn't here too. Clone Wars is on. All this stuff is vastly on this big spectrum of Star Wars tonality. But the fact that in the last 8 months we've gotten the far ends of that spectrum now, and they're pushing those bounds, continue to push the bounds and tell a good story, and that's all I can say about that. And I'm glad that they swung for the fences with both of those, and they seem to have hit home runs.
I'm looking forward to Ahsoka season 2 because I know that it got its shots,
Yeah.
taken at it after it came out, and it'll be interesting because unlike say Acolyte that probably won't get another shot, Filoni and company, now we don't have to worry about the Bale and Skull question. And we know from Clone Wars and some of the stuff and what we were just talking about, like Filoni didn't mind getting weird in Clone Wars.
No.
Lucas as well, because I mean they were both kind of working together on that.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, obviously different writers from Gilroy, but the story should be kind of interesting because I think that there are some learns, and everybody kind of thinks that like this stuff was made, a long time ago. So the week to week reactions and hot takes, nobody cares. No, look at my own number. Nobody cares. But I would say that they're not immune to it. They hear it. And I think that even they would say like, you know what? Okay, some of that tracks what we're doing. Like this time, let's try something a little different. And so not only will there be more expectations on something like an Ahsoka season 2 because of Andor, I think that's just as much on them as well. And yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting because we're going to see a furthering of that story with characters that we know and love and have gotten to see. And so I'm excited for it whenever it may drop. And maybe it's just as well that there'll be a little breathing space because, like I said, I think we've had about a year's worth of Star Wars released in about 3 to 4 weeks, and it'll be fun to kind of go back over that. The only thing that I kind of miss is that they're Andor cards, other than on Star Wars Card Trader. Where are the figures? Where are the extra comics? Where are the Andor bed sheets? All right, can we get a
come on?
Can we get a Dr. Gorse bed sheet? I mean, come on, really? I've got these great ideas. I don't know why nobody's calling me. I don't know why I don't have commercial advertising on my
phone's not ringing. Disney, come on.
I just want to like a shot on like a pillowcase where it's like you got that ISB officer after part of gas kind of takes him just holding up his hand to 2 stormtroopers. I'm like, which by the way was a master stroke. That's when you go, that's great writing and nothing was said. Absolutely nothing was said, and and you just killed it. So yeah, we'll be enjoying this. We'll be talking about this, and gosh, it's really fun because there's just so many things, and it's a watershed moment, and it's nice that there's maybe not that thing happening right after, so we can kind of go, all right, nothing's happening just quite yet.
Yeah,
a little bit of breathing room so we can take it all in, and I'd be curious to revisit this because next year is the 10th anniversary of Rogue One. So
coming up,
yeah, are we going to start doing 1-year anniversaries of Andor? Why not? Like I said, I think people, I think at this point we could be talking about Andor every week until their anniversary. And I think there'd be a segment of folks out there going, yeah, just keep going.
Just never stop. Once you finish the rewatch, start it over again.
Yeah, it's just just have it on a continuous loop.
That's right. As we all should. Now, I was thinking about you the other day when I saw a YouTube video that had like Diego Luna and Alan Tudyk opening up some of the merchandise for Andor, and it had Diego Luna literally opening up a card pack and going through some Andor cards that just come out recently, and he was talking about them. So there's fresh card content out there for you.
As long as you can find it. Yeah, there have been some different kind of more higher end releases. I know we have Topps Chrome that's coming out in July. That'll probably be the one that you can find on your shelves, because I know that GameStop, amongst other things, is already doing pre-orders in store. So get your blasters, get your hobby boxes, because there'll be some characters in there that I'm sure everyone would love to see. And hey, take to a con and have somebody sign it. Man,
is there a Dr. Gorse card in that set?
There should be. I want to see somebody
a signed Dr. Gorse card.
Oh my gosh. But also it's like, get having the folks who do all the sketch cards, like, let's see some crazy Andor sketches. I know that
Yeah.
a friend of mine for my birthday got me an Azuri art um digital sketch of
Mhm.
Edie Karn, and it was just
Oh.
gorgeous. So um a tough character, but like now it's like I want to see that sketch where it's like the entire
Oh,
card
yeah.
is white and you have an orange dress with Edie Karn on it. What a great way to what a great character. And
What a time to be alive. Get the
what a
Edie
time.
Karn, trading card out. We gotta
Make
bring
it
out the
happen,
good.
Tops.
We gotta bring out the good china, folks. It's it's Thanksgiving. People are over.
The good
Bring out the
fondue.
Edie. Yep,
the,
bring out the
the,
Edie Karn set.
oh man, with that crazy fondue pot.
Totally, totally.
Oh
Well,
man.
Greg, we have recapped Andor season 2, and thank you for joining us on this journey here to remember what we can. There's still so much more to chat about this season, and like you said, podcasts will be doing this at great length over the next couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
not just weeks here. We'll still be talking about this show years from now. It's Star Wars Celebration 27. We'll have like an Andor get together probably of folks, like all of the they'll probably have some Gorman cosplayers and doing that chant that national anthem chant that they were doing throughout the LA Convention Center. So I can't wait for that kind of fun stuff to be seen in a couple of years. But where can the folks find you in the Rebel Base Card podcast as you transition out of Andor season into other things in the summertime?
So now that, excuse me, Andor hasn't necessarily, Andor has kind of given me my life back. You can find me. Yeah, it's been kind of quiet on some of the socials, but generally Instagram and X I am on, daily at Rebel Base Card. I do cross post on, Blue Sky, and I will send posts to Facebook and to Threads as well. You can find me in the Star Wars Card Trader app at Cornfed Tech. And there's been some great Andor cards lately because they're doing the chapters. They
Mm,
kind of picked up from where the physical set, the online weekly ones kind of stopped a while ago. But there are some great Andor cards in that app. You can find me there, and there's a great community of folks in there as well. The app just it celebrated year 10, and they are going strong. They've got some great because we had was it as we were recording, it's an anniversary of Empire Strikes Back's initial
my
release back
gosh,
in
yes.
1980 on May
Oof,
21st, as we were recording this. So they put the
45
sticker,
years. Wow.
45 years, and they put the sticker inserts a set in the Star Wars Card Trader app, so you can see some of the variants of that, which are great. And so it's always
Wow.
fun pushing the envelope. So yeah, if you guys haven't been in the app for a while, go back in the app. You can do it totally free to play. You don't have to be like me and some others. But there are great ways to just pull some great cards and just love revisiting, especially with Andor, because they're going to keep going for a little bit
Yeah.
with some of their weekly sets. So they've been doing a great job over there. But yeah, that's where generally you can find me. I was able to write reviews this show just like we did for Acolyte and Skeleton
Hmm.
Crew. Over at Fanthatrax, I was in on the review pool, and thanks a lot to Mark Newbold and all the folks over at Fanthatrax. Hopefully, I'll be writing for them in the future as well and covering more stories there. So it's kind of fun. And then, maybe one of these days I can get back to doing my Substack. Um, so many things to write about that now I don't have to watch a 3-hour movie every week.
I think we're all like thrilled that we don't have to do that on a Tuesday night anymore. Um, at least speaking for the two of us here.
I still have to see Thunderbolts, for heaven's sakes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
hopefully I
Oh
can.
my gosh, Greg. Gotta get you to the theater. No
I
more
know,
movies
I
on
know.
Tuesdays.
I know. It's like, all right, I don't have to do like a 2-hour podcast on Andor after watching 3 hours of Andor,
Hmm.
and then writing a half hour about Andor. So yeah, I'd like to Thunderbolts. I like to see it while
Reclaim
it's
some
still
of your time back. Yes.
exactly. But I did manage to get Revenge of the Sith in. I was happy to see it on the big screen. It's a shame it was only in theaters that one weekend or that one
Mm,
week,
yeah.
but it was
Ugh,
fun. And yeah, and
2 weeks,
you
guys. Come on.
gotta put the stuff in theaters. I don't care what. And it's the 17th anniversary of I don't care. Just put it in the theater, and then. Yeah, if you're worried about getting people to like, there is a segment of the fandom that would go and like you put anything in the theater, and
And they'll see it.
we'll put butts in seats.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Star Wars fans will show up if you put it in the
Exactly.
theaters. They will come. They will come.
Oh, and just lastly, we are going to be having you on
That's right.
breakfast pack talking about Light and Magic season 2, and that's going to be a fun show. We'll be doing it here probably fairly soon because I think we have yet another Andor one to kind of do that we had kind of discussed. But after that, I think we're free and clear to talk about um, Light and Magic, and then I think we have to do Tales of the Underworld. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
No shortage of content right now.
no, not for some time. But anyway, thanks again for having me on, though.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure, Greg. Thank you for joining the show. And for the folks listening at home, thank you for listening to this episode. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode in your podcast feeds. And until then, may the force be with you. Take care.